Unveiling the incredible journey of Genghis Khan, how one warrior transformed history forever. Jack Carson hunched over his desk, dusty textbooks piled high around him, his eyes skimming relentlessly. The sepia-toned pages whispered stories of battles, ambition, and a warrior's heart. Genghis Khan, he muttered, digging deeper into a life that had reshaped worlds. This was more than just historical fact. It struck a chord in him, a reflection of struggle and fierce determination that was missing from the sanitized lessons he had been teaching. In a town that thrived on reputation and status, Jack felt like a shadow, silently fumbling through a life burdened by bills and the weight of others' expectations. His passion for history clashed violently with the disdain he encountered looked down upon by the elite families whose names graced the town's buildings and parks. They spoke in hushed tones, their wealth painting an eager veneer before his modest life. He found himself questioning his worth as he prepared for the following day's lesson on a subject he believed would ignite passion in his students. Yet fear flickered beneath the surface, a fear of being scoffed at by school board members entrenched in their outdated ideals. Was he risking his career by daring to tread off the beaten path? Just the thought made his stomach twist, nostalgia melding with anxiety as he recalled moments when he had been told, "Stay in your lane." Deep down, doubt gnawed at him. What if Genghis Khan, the great unifier, was just another topic to these kids, another story lost on a community too accustomed to its comfort? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The school board's cold skepticism was palpable, the atmosphere stifling as he envisioned their condescending smirks. They wouldn't understand the urgency of Genghis' story, how it paralleled his own humble requests for recognition and respect. The elders in town began slipping the truth of their family legacies into whispered conversations, histories twisted together like an intricate quilt, and Jack found solace only in their eyes. Yet in those fleeting connections, there was a nagging fear: would they support him against the board's disapproval, or would he face their scorn as well? As his thoughts spiraled, a rising tide of anguish threatened to engulf him. He felt like a lone wolf amidst the chaos, desperately needing a guidepost to navigate through these murky waters. Then, as if fate had conspired, a retired professor appeared at his door, promising guidance and insight. Was this a lifeline or a distraction from the letters piling up in the mail, each envelope tighter than the last? Each suggestion of Genghis Khan's complex leadership could be the very thread that unraveled his own tightly wound life, revealing secrets he wasn't ready for. Standing on the precipice of change, Jack realized he must confront not only the entrenched beliefs of the community but also the veiled truths about himself. He felt the weight of history pressing against him, a storm brewing on the horizon as he prepared for the showdown with the school board, a reckoning that could alter everything he had worked for. Could he channel Genghis Khan's defiance into his own fight for respect and acceptance? Tension coiled tightly within him, his heart trembled with unanswered questions, blurring lines between who he was and who he wished to be. How much would he risk to carve out a place in this world, and what would happen if his own family's secrets were unearthed in the fight? The stakes had never been higher as he prepared to battle not just for his curriculum but for the very essence of his identity. With his lesson plan firmly in mind, Jack spent the night wrestling with a mix of excitement and dread. It became increasingly clear that addressing Genghis Khan meant more than simply reciting facts. He needed to inspire, to connect the fears and dreams of his students with the unyielding spirit of a man who had reshaped nations. Yet as dawn broke, the shadows of doubt loomed larger. He regarded his reflection in the cracked mirror of his small bathroom, questioning who would step into that classroom later. It struck him suddenly his students might be yearning for something more than the filtered version of history they had been presented. Hadn't he been hungry, too, craving depth in a world that often prioritized prestige over truth? This realization ignited a flicker of hope, but it was quickly extinguished by thoughts of the disapproving school board, their frowns as fixed as granite. Pulled by an urgent need to prepare, he dove headfirst into historical accounts of Khan's brilliant tactical maneuvers and economic strategies that unified warring tribes. With each paragraph, Jack felt a pulse of kinship with Genghis. The warrior faced adversity with tenacity, perhaps he could take a page from that resolve. He scribbled notes, crafting ways to illustrate how Khan's leadership techniques could apply to challenges of their own, such as overcoming social hierarchies within their community. Jack could feel a transformation brewing within him, one that craved to be unleashed upon his unsuspecting classroom. The day arrived, and with it a flood of anxiety. Standing in front of his class, everything he had prepared felt too inadequate. The classroom of teenagers presented a challenge far steeper than the Mongolian steppes. Their hollow expressions seemed to mock his efforts. History is alive, he began, striving for enthusiasm. Not just a genre of dry facts but a grand tale of ambition, bravery, and the quest for identity. Yet as he launched into the saga of Genghis Khan, Jack was surprised to find a momentum building within the room. He presented Khan not simply as a conqueror but as a visionary who shaped the future and brought disparate peoples together under a banner of unity. He spoke passionately about the First Silk Road, how it opened trade and cultural exchange, reflecting the relationships and connections of their own lives. As he gestured, there was a shift. Several students leaned in closer, the tension in the atmosphere slowly dissipating like mist under the sun. Their attention ignited a sense of purpose within him, a spark he had longed to feel. But right on the cusp of triumph, a voice sliced through the atmosphere sharp as a dagger. It was one of the students, arms crossed defiantly, a smirk playing on their lips. Why do we need to listen to this? Isn't this just a glorification of a tyrant? Caught off guard, Jack felt the ground shift beneath him. This was at the moment that could either solidify his triumph or tumble into disaster. He inhaled deeply, the room falling silent, waiting. That's an important question, he replied, his voice steady. How do we discern between the conqueror and the burden of their actions? Maybe learning about the past helps us shape a better future, all aspects of it, including the mistakes. Invisible chains held him steady, igniting a fierce debate among the students. For the first time, they were not just passive learners, their engagement sparked a fire he had only dreamed of. But as he navigated the passionate dialogue, Jack could feel the looming presence of the school board's expectations weighing heavily overhead. Would they see this passionate exchange as a failure? Would his progressive approach lead to repercussions he was not prepared to face? As the bell rang, signaling the end of class, Jack stood amidst a whirlwind of conversations. He had fought more than for a lesson plan that day, he had begun a battle within himself. The realization hit he would need to confront not just the school board but their aversion to change, head-on, for the future he envisioned. In that moment, everything shifted. Yet as the students filed out, questions churned in his mind like a storm. Had he done enough? Had he transformed their apathy into something more? The impending board meeting loomed like a specter, and among those thoughts lay an unsettling truth: the fight for his vision was far from over. The echo of Genghis Khan reverberated in his spirit, a question whispering through the chaos: was he ready to embrace the warrior within? The clock ticked toward the impending board meeting, his heart racing with the potential consequences of the fight ahead. But would he wield that power to transform not just their perception of history, but perhaps his own destiny? In the hours leading up to the board meeting, Jack paced the confines of his dimly lit classroom, the walls steeped in the remnants of earlier debates. Each tick of the clock felt like a hammer, driving home the realization that he stood at a crossroads. The path he took would undoubtedly reshape not only his career but potentially his identity as an educator. His lesson on Genghis Khan had ignited a spark in his students, yet lingering doubts swirled relentlessly within him. Would the board recognize his approach as innovation or fault it for daring to tread where the curriculum dictated caution? He glanced toward the scattered papers on his desk, remnants of lesson plans, student notes, and feedback forms. Amidst the chaos lay a note from a student, written in bright blue ink: "Thanks for making history feel real." The words wrapped around his heart like a lifeline, stitching together his wavering confidence. In that moment, he understood that even a single resonant connection could make all the difference. Determination shifted through him. He wouldn't just walk into that meeting to defend his singular lesson plan. He would advocate for a broader vision education that embraced nuance and self-reflection instead of narrow black and white narratives. But with this steely resolve flickered the specter of self-doubt. Was he prepared to face a group that probably saw him as just an inexperienced teacher battling against a tidal wave of traditionalism? As the time drew near, Jack slipped into a gray blazer, a semblance of professionalism to match the fervor forming within him. The reflection in the glass pane seemed alien yet familiar. He was not just a teacher, but a pioneer standing on the precipice of change. He recalled Genghis Khan's audacity, how he forged alliances that some deemed impossible, and he let that inspiration fortify his spirit. Drawing in a breath, he left the classroom, each step echoing the measured heartbeat of his ambition. Entering the boardroom, he was immediately met with solemn expressions and the sterile scent of polished wood. The board members sat in their chairs like judges, poised to dissect his every word. Expectations hung thick in the air, a palpable weight resting on his shoulders. Jack could feel the walls closing in as he took his seat, memories of the students' engagement still flickering in his mind. Standing before the board, he understood this was not merely a performance, it was a defining moment that could sculpt the very fabric of his teaching philosophy. "Thank you for allowing me to present today," he began, his voice betraying none of the nerves that danced beneath the surface. "I believe we have a responsibility to teach history in a way that challenges our students, encourages their critical thinking, and invites them to draw connections to their own experiences." The board members exchanged glances, expressions ranging from skepticism to intrigue. Jack powered through, recalling the faces and voices of the students whose perspectives had come alive just hours earlier. He unfolded his lesson plan, highlighting moments where students were encouraged to dissect not just Khan's victories but the ethical dimensions of his conquests. One member interjected sharply, "But aren't you concerned this could romanticize a brutal figure? It can be dangerous to present historical figures without emphasizing their faults." Jack felt the challenge pierce through him, yet he welcomed it. "Absolutely, and I have every intention of addressing the darker aspects of history. The goal isn't to glorify, it's to understand the multifaceted nature of humanity. Just as we learned from Genghis Khan, who unified vast territories, we also need to discuss the cost of that unification." I shifted a slight nod from one member, a furrowed brow from another. Jack sensed the tides of perception teetering, and with it, his resolve deepened. He had not been summoned to simply defend his lessons. He had come to lay the groundwork for a transformational approach that valued exploration over preservation of the status quo. As he concluded, a newfound certainty resonated within him. Whatever the outcome, he had stood firm against the tide, willing to embrace the warrior spirit not only of Genghis Khan but of a teacher committed to fostering growth and vulnerability. And as he left the boardroom, the tension still clinging to the air, he knew that a fundamental shift had begun from the classroom to the very governance of the educational structure he wielded. The question loomed ever closer. What if he could lead not just a revolution in thought, but an evolution of perception that rippled throughout the entire school? The next chapter in Jack's journey was just beginning, and the thought electrified him, a beacon amidst an uncertain path. As Jack stepped back into the corridor, the cacophony of muffled conversations and shuffling papers reminded him he was still anchored in the here and now, tethered to a daily reality that often felt worlds apart from the ideals he wished to instill. The board meeting had ignited his ambition, but stoking it didn't quell the clouds of anxiety still swirling overhead. What had seemed like a battlefield moment felt more like the delicate beginnings of a much larger campaign. With each calculated step he took, Jack began to contemplate the myriad of possibilities ahead. The board hadn't just heard his words, could they perceive the passion underpinning them? As much as he had thrust forward the vision of transformative education, what lay ahead might demand even more from him, a battle against the very inertia he sought to shift. He wandered toward the staff lounge, allowing the warmth of the sun streaming through the window to wash over him. Jack needed a moment to realign his thoughts, to sift through the fragments of his aspirations and the reality of his surroundings. How could he rally his colleagues to embrace the vision that simmered in his heart? He'd have to delve deeper into persuasion and collaboration, essential tools of the educator-turned-leader. In the lounge, Jack noticed a small group of teachers clustered in conversation, their laughter ringing out, punctuated by shared anecdotes of classroom escapades. Years of bureaucracy could dim the brightest of spirits. He had seen it enough times during a decade in the education system. But today was different. Fired by a renewed sense of purpose, he approached the group. "Hey everyone, can I join you for a moment?" His heart pounded as he drew nearer, but he pushed back the impatience gnawing at his resolve. Before he could second-guess himself, Jack initiated the conversation. "I presented a new lesson plan on Genghis Khan at the board meeting. It emphasizes critical thinking and discussion of historical complexities rather than just memorizing dates and events." Skeptical gazes met him, but in their reticence lay a flicker of intrigue. One colleague, Lisa, bit her lip, then spoke cautiously. "That sounds like a big shift. Do you really think the board is ready for that?" Jack felt a spark ignite, a challenge worth embracing. "Honestly, I don't know. But while I might be the one standing in front of them, I can't help but think we need change on all fronts." A brief silence followed, as the group absorbed his words. Perhaps it was the hushed undertone of sincerity or the urgency in his voice. He could feel it, something transformative was beginning to blossom. "I'm willing to organize a seminar, a collaborative brainstorming session for us to explore this further," Jack continued, pushing aside his lingering doubts. "Let us break these walls down together. Who's in?" Glances shifted uncertainly at first, but slowly, hands began to raise. There was reluctance, perhaps fear of stepping outside the norms that had long governed their teaching methods. Yet Jack felt a palpable shift. They needed to discuss their experiences, confront the potential repercussions of change, but more, he could feel the collective yearning for something more significant. Jack's excitement grew. He realized he was not merely carrying the burden of a single idea but igniting a broader movement within his own circle. But as the fire began to spread, so too did the complexity of his role as a facilitator and potential leader. His thoughts spiraled into uncharted territories. What if the school administration pushed back harder than anticipated? What if his colleagues grew hesitant, retracting into old methods? Doubts clawed at the corners of his mind, but he steadied himself, determined to see this nascent vision through. As conversations deepened and ideas bounced around the lounge, Jack sensed the shift in energy. Transformation would not be without its trials. What would he do if faced with direct opposition, not just from the board but from those he aimed to rally? The answers eluded him. But they begged exploration. That lingering question of resistance held his thoughts captive as he prepared his strategy, everything he had fought for pushing against the constraints of doubt. What awaited him next on this ambitious path of disruption and reform? The battle wasn't won yet, it had only just begun. As Jack returned to his classroom, the walls that had once felt confining now seemed charged with potential. This was his sanctuary, a place where he could test his ideas in the fertile ground of young minds. He took a deep breath, his heart still racing from the earlier conversations. There was something electrifying about the possibility of change, but it also felt dangerously precarious. Shuffling papers on his desk, he found himself continually distracted by the thought of the seminar he had proposed. Would it be as vibrant and engaging as he hoped, or would it be merely another hour lost to the same old discussions? Jack realized he needed to create an experience that would both inspire and invigorate, a catalyst for collective growth. His mind raced with strategies. What could he present that would not only capture their attention but also encourage his colleagues to question the status quo? He picked up a whiteboard marker and began sketching a loose outline of the session structure, envisioning engaging activities and thought-provoking discussions that encouraged open dialogue. The first step would be to establish a safe space. Jack understood that for any significant transformation to occur, he had to foster an environment where ideas could flow freely, untethered by fears of ridicule. He sighed, revisiting the memories of his own early teaching days, remembering how criticism often stung. He would share his own vulnerabilities, demonstrating that mistakes could lead to growth. Jack's storytelling abilities were one of his hidden assets, and he resolved to incorporate examples from his own teaching failures and victories. This authenticity would help in breaking the ice, but he knew he would need to also draw from the experiences of others. They needed to share stories, not just about their classrooms but about the students whose lives had built resilience within each of them. Hours passed in a whirl of ideas, and by the time the school day ended, Jack felt an unwavering determination solidifying within him. Yet, doubt still loomed. As he prepared his materials, he couldn't shake the feeling of impending resistance. How would he respond if colleagues dismissed his ideas outright, if they clung more tightly to their traditions than to innovative methods? The staff room was becoming his testing ground, where he had witnessed a glimmer of enthusiasm. Yet, in the secluded corners of his mind, he knew that the true fight would be to confront the ingrained pessimism about change that echoed through the corridors of their school. He felt a knot form in his chest. Deciding to reach out before the seminar, Jack sent a group email inviting his colleagues personally, hoping to further engage them. As he hit send, a wave of vulnerability washed over him. Had he overstepped? Would he be seen as too ambitious or naive? Reluctant self-doubt gnawed at him. What would he do if his colleagues did not buy into the vision he had fervently cultivated? Their judgments held a power he could scarcely fathom. Yet, that seed of necessity of sparking a re-evaluation of their pedagogical methods drove him onward. With a deep breath, Jack resolved to focus on the immediate task, to craft an agenda that resonated deeply with every person in that room. His commitment to transparency would force him to confront his own fears about failure and to inquire openly into the thoughts and trepidations of those around him. As the days trickled down to the seminar, Jack sensed an approaching storm of emotions. Would they rally around this concept, or would he find himself standing alone, facing the tides of tradition? He felt a heavy weight settle over him, the notion that he might soon have to confront not only his colleagues' doubts but also the unyielding systems entrenched in the education landscape. The time had come, doubt loomed as thick as fog, and amid his hopes for radical change lay stark realities he had yet to face. The battle for his vision was on the horizon, waiting, as he took a decisive step toward that vulnerable moment of truth. Would he rise as a defined leader, or would this struggle fracture his resolve? The stakes felt monumental, and at that crossroads, he prepared himself for a reckoning that could either empower or break him. The morning of the seminar arrived, and Jack's stomach churned with nervous energy. He stared at his reflection in the mirror, realizing that this moment was more than just a presentation, it was a crucible that would either forge him into the leader he aspired to be or leave him fractured. The weight of expectation felt palpably heavy on his shoulders, and he found himself pacing, rehearsal notes clutched tightly in his hand. Upon entering the staff room, he was greeted by a mixture of curious glances and indifferent nods. The atmosphere hummed with a chatter that felt intrusive, almost suffocating. Jack's heart raced as he wondered whether he could truly captivate this group of skeptical peers harboring entrenched beliefs. He took a seat at the front, forcing himself to breathe deeply, anchoring himself in the urgency of purpose. As he laid out the agenda, the chatter hushed, replaced by an air of cautious anticipation. He launched into his introduction with a personal story, a moment of vulnerability from his early teaching days when he had misjudged a student's need for support. It was a lesson in humility, and as he spoke, Jack observed a flicker of recognition in the eyes of some colleagues. Perhaps they, too, had grappled with missteps in their classrooms. The first activity he introduced involved sharing personal anecdotes. He watched with a mix of trepidation and hope as colleagues began recounting their own struggles and triumphs. There was an unexpected camaraderie in these stories, a thread of shared experience that began weaving them together. Jack could feel a tentative but palpable connection forming among them. However, just as the energy surged in an uplifting direction, a voice interjected from the back of the room. It was Sarah, a seasoned teacher known for her critical outlook. But are we really going to change anything? Isn't this just another exercise in futility? The room went tense. Jack felt a sudden coldness in the air, his heart beat a primal drum against the backdrop of her skepticism. Jack had anticipated resistance, yet Sarah's words struck deeper than he had imagined. It laid bare the very doubt he had been wrestling with: could they really change? He paused, gathering strength within himself. "You're right to question," he replied, his tone steady. "That's the essence of what we're doing here. Change isn't easy, but every great movement begins with one person daring to challenge the status quo. Let us discuss why we're here, what we hold dear about our teaching, and where we feel stuck." This strategic counter offered a flicker of authenticity that shifted the dynamics of the room. Conversations resumed, but now with edge. Colleagues started to voice concerns and hopes more freely. Jack facilitated, guiding them to share broader experiences of their students. The fears and frustrations found their voices, but so did the inspiration and aspirations. Jack felt invigorated. He recognized within him the shaken but rising resilience of a leader. As the seminar progressed, the momentum built. Jack witnessed the small eddies of doubt reignite into currents of enthusiasm as the room buzzed with possibilities they had not considered before. But just as he began to feel victorious, he caught sight of Sarah's disapproving expression lingering across the room. Her skepticism still hung like a dark cloud, ready to rain doubt on this newfound camaraderie. After the discussion, as the colleagues collected their thoughts to leave, Jack overheard snippets of conversations filled with revived energy. But he also heard whispers of skepticism that echoed Sarah's earlier comments. Jack's heart sank. Had he truly reached them, or was he merely delaying the inevitable clash with the fears that gripped their hearts? He knew the battle wasn't over. The real challenge lay in maintaining this momentum. As he watched the last of his colleagues filter out, he felt an internal breach form. A thought gnawed at him: was he prepared for the continual effort it would take to foster change in a system resistant to transformation? Jack stared at the empty room, burdened with new responsibility. The day had reminded him of the vulnerability needed to share this journey. But lurking beneath his burgeoning resolve was the unshakable fear of failure against the backdrop of a system steeped in traditions. The question at the forefront of his mind loomed larger than the last. Would he have the fortitude to face not just the challenges ahead but also those who would challenge him, obscured not only by tradition but the desire for change? The storm of uncertainty brewed within him, and as he pondered the voices yet to be uplifted, he braced himself for the confrontation looming ahead. What awaited him next would truly test the limits of his ambition and leadership. As the murmur of post-seminar conversations faded, Jack was left standing in the empty room, the weight of the future pressing upon him like a leaden mantle. He felt the exhilaration and vulnerability blend into an unsettling cocktail of emotion. Could he truly inspire a shift in attitude, or would he inevitably face the entrenched cynicism that loomed just beneath the surface? It was easy to become overwhelmed by self-doubt in solitude. The remnants of Sarah's skepticism haunted him, echoing in the recesses of his mind. He combated the temptation to wallow in insecurity. Instead, he clenched his fists, feeling the paper of his notes crumple beneath his grip as he took a deep breath, focusing on the resolve he had summoned earlier. He schemed about the next steps. Maintaining momentum meant continuous engagement, and he recognized that he needed to carve out an intentional path that included every voice, including Sarah's. Days passed, yet the tension lingered like a smog over the faculty. Jack began to meet informally with small groups, inviting colleagues to discuss their experiences outside the constraints of the formal setting. He positioned these gatherings as opportunities for open dialogue rather than structured seminars. He needed to shift the focus away from expectations that stifled conversation. There, he found small moments of connection: a candid laugh shared over a struggle, a nod of understanding during discussions of the everyday chaos in their classrooms. The gatherings unveiled something unexpected. Colleagues who had previously appeared wooden and distant began to show glimpses of passion color their conversations. Names surfaced, students who had moved them stirred memories in a way that pushed aside the bitterness of past defeats. The emotional honesty these meetings cultivated was mesmerizing, wrapping around Jack in a warm embrace of shared humanity. However, during one particularly animated meeting, Jack felt the all-too-familiar chill as he noticed Sarah lingering at the edge, arms crossed and posture rigid. Her presence was a reminder of the skepticism that still lingered. Jack's heart quickened. This was his opportunity to confront that specter head-on, not with defensiveness, but with an open invitation to contribute. "Sarah," he spoke, allowing the soft notes of vulnerability to lace his voice, "we're discussing our challenges, and your perspective would be invaluable. It's easier to change when we put everything on the table, right?" Silence hung palpable in the air as eyes turned to her, awaiting a response. Jack's mind raced. Had he overstepped? The second stretched as he braced himself for her retort. But instead, she exhaled slowly, her expression shifting from disbelief to contemplation. The walls began to crack. "I appreciate the invitation," she said, her critical shield faltering slightly. "But I still think we're skipping over the hard truths. What if meeting here just breeds talk without action?" Her pointed words stung, but they also ignited Jack's determination. "What if we start by defining what action looks like for us?" he proposed, the idea forming as he spoke. "Maybe action begins with addressing our fears before we jump into solutions." Sarah's eyes widened, but Jack caught a flicker of curiosity in her stance. His heart surged with hope. Perhaps this was a crack opening in the stalemate. As conversations resumed, Jack honed in on his intention. Each discussion could be a scaffold to build resilience and accountability. He started to frame an initiative that would infuse those gatherings with actionable goals, transforming conversations into collaborative efforts focused on their students' well-being. Yet, with that intention came the knowledge that the real work lay ahead. There was a fine line between rallying the group and leading with intention, and he questioned whether he possessed the strength to nurture a path that required constant vigilance and flexibility. As nights fell, Jack often found himself awake, considering the framework springing forth from their encounters. Could he master the balance of empathy and leadership? The questions piled on heavy like the darkened sky, shadowing the potential that lay just beyond. He had made strides, but the journey ahead still loomed vast. He knew he wouldn't simply encounter resistance from Sarah but also from his internal monologues steeped in insecurity. If he were to lead, he needed to solidify his own convictions and embrace the vulnerability of asking for help and support from his peers. Jack's thoughts spiraled into the quiet night. The true challenge that awaited him was not just navigating the doubts of others but confronting his pervasive fear of inadequacy. The realization sent a shockwave through him. He understood the forthcoming confrontation with Sarah wasn't merely professional, but intensely personal. In this unfolding drama, would Jack rise to the occasion, or would he falter in the very attempt to unify a voice within his colleagues? The call to embrace his role as a leader felt like a pivotal juncture, a point where courage and vulnerability would either intertwine into a beacon of hope or splinter beneath the weight of expectation. Tomorrow would be pivotal, the path would soon become clearer, but the question lingered: was he ready to face the collective doubts that lay ahead, or would he retreat into the shadows of apprehension? The morning sun broke through the pale curtains, illuminating the remnants of Jack's restless night etched into his features. As he prepared for the day, he focused on the promise of the conversations he'd initiated. Today, he would confront not only Sarah but also the nebulous fears lurking within himself. Each step felt heavy, a reminder of the uncertainty that clung to him like a shadow. Arriving at the faculty lounge, he exchanged nervous glances with colleagues already gathered. The morning air was thick with unspoken tension. He needed to steer it toward productive dialogue. Jack took a deep breath and approached the cluster of faculty with a smile, trying to mask the tumult of nerves threatening to bubble to the surface. "Good morning, everyone. I was thinking we could talk about what genuine action looks like in our classrooms," he began, the words tumbling out quicker than he intended. "I'd love for us to brainstorm how we can translate our discussions into measurable steps, not just empty words." Murphy, the math teacher, nodded, his face softening. "Talking could lead to doing, but there needs to be a clear direction. We're all a bit stuck after the last few years, aren't we?" Jack seized the opportunity, tightening the grip on his own resolve. "Exactly. And I think if we acknowledge our fears, we'll have a clearer insight into our next actions. Maybe we all share that fear of failure." The conversation flowed. A mix of agreement and tension washed over the group as they confronted their concerns. Sarah sat cross-armed, skepticism echoing in her silence. The weight of her disapproval pressed heavily on Jack's chest. But instead of shrinking away, he leaned into the discomfort. "Sarah," he said, attempting to bridge their chasm. "You've mentioned before that words mean nothing without accountability. What steps do you think we could take that hold us responsible?" Her eyes flashed with surprise, and for a split second, Jack caught a spark of enthusiasm in her expression. "If you actually want to lead a discussion on accountability, we need to talk about our curriculum. Are we really serving our students, or are we just maintaining the status quo?" He felt buoyed by her passion but knew it was time to confront the uncomfortable truths she harbored. "Let us not just critique, let's outline how we can change it together. What needs to shift for you to feel confident in the actions we take?" As the group began to discuss specific changes to their teaching methods, Jack's heart raced. This dialogue was exactly what he envisioned, a fusion of shared experiences culminating in a strategic action plan. Each contribution fueled his belief that transformation was possible, peeling back layers of doubt that crowded his mind. But a lingering voice whispered in the back of Jack's consciousness, was he merely avoiding deeper discussions about his fears? It nudged at him, daring him to face the innate fear of inadequacy he had yet to explore. What if these gatherings fall flat? What if his own failings sabotaged his aspirations? Late in the conversation, when spirits appeared to wane, he sensed a turn. "Let us promise each other to try something new this week in our classrooms. Just one change, no matter how small," he proposed, watching the group weigh the idea. Sarah met his gaze from across the table, her expression inscrutable. The silence felt heavy, and Jack feared this might be the breaking point of their fragile discussion. "All right, Jack," she finally said, and the glimmer of tentative resolve shone through her steel-gray eyes. "I'll share how I'm incorporating student feedback into my lesson plans. But you better be prepared to follow through on your end." A ripple of laughter broke the tension, and Jack felt a part of him unclench. Perhaps he was on a path not just to reclaim his authority, but to create authentic connections. Yet, as he watched the group rally around shared objectives, beneath the surface churned disquiet. Would the commitments made today be substantiated in their actions tomorrow? Would he find the courage to face not just the group's doubts but also the lurking insecurities that threatened to derail him? Jack understood now that while he could forge connections, the deeper change necessitated unwavering commitment not just from his colleagues but from himself as well. The stakes were higher than he initially grasped, and as he left that gathering, an unsettling but resolute whisper echoed through his thoughts, challenging him. "Are you truly ready to face what comes next?" The weight of that question settled on his shoulders, a quiet harbinger of the trials still looming ahead. Jack awoke the next day to the frantic beeping of his alarm, a reminder that action awaited him. The exhilaration from yesterday's meeting had begun to disperse like mist in the sunlight, replaced by an unsettling sense of pressure. Today wasn't just about discussing change, it was time to execute it. With a quick glance in the mirror, he recognized a weary determination in his own reflection. He moved through his morning routine with a practiced efficiency. Yet with each bite of toast, the gnawing question remained, could he genuinely pivot his teaching style and impact his students? At school, it felt different, almost electric. As he stepped into the classroom, he noticed a shift. The students were buzzing, ready to engage in purposeful discussions. They were not like the faceless mass he had often encountered, they were individuals with hopes and fears of their own. But could he connect that hopeful enthusiasm with the commitments he had discussed with his colleagues? After the bell rang, Jack gathered his class for a brief announcement. "Today, I'd like to share something unconventional. After discussing with other teachers about trying new things, I'm intrigued to implement student feedback and to reshape how we approach our lessons." A murmur spread across the room. Wasn't that what they had always wanted, a voice that counted? He could feel his heart pounding, the fear of failure lurking in the corners of his mind. "I want all of you to help me transform this class. What do you think we need to change?" Silence followed. A few hands floated tentatively into the air. "Can we have more group work?" ventured Maria, the budding artist with an infectious enthusiasm. That was a start, a tangible action point. More creative projects would be nice, added Sam, who often struggled with traditional tests. As the dialogue evolved, Jack felt a slow betrayal of his earlier hesitation. Ideas bounced back and forth, building momentum. He couldn't rest on old methods, it was time to embrace the risks that came with change. Yet as excitement filled the room, shadows of doubt crept back. If he made promises today, what if he couldn't deliver? If he encouraged creativity, his students might stumble. Was he ready for those consequences? After class, Jack found himself lingering in his empty room. He felt exposed, almost raw from the vulnerability he had initiated. Real change required bravery, and perhaps he had begun to cultivate that in ways he didn't expect. But could he sustain it? Later, when he reconvened with the faculty, energy buzzed in the air as they shared their initial experiences implementing newfound strategies. Jack spoke openly about the revelations from his classroom, how the students hungered for a participatory role. A chorus of voices chimed in, and for the first time, he felt he could genuinely lead along with them, united in the fight against complacency. But there, amidst the excitement, Sarah's stark critique still lingered, a reminder of his precarious balance. "Remember, Jack," she warned, her tone serious. "Change doesn't happen overnight. You need to be prepared for resistance, even from your own students." Her words struck a nerve. He had ignited a spark, but now he faced the daunting task of maintaining that flame. As the discussions wrapped up for the day, Jack noticed the glimmer of collective ambition around him. He felt tethered to something larger than himself, but the fear of potential failure clawed at his resolve. Would he summon the courage each day to face the expectations he had set, both for himself and his students? The challenge ahead felt insurmountable, yet faintly achievable. The night was closing in, and as he stepped into the gathering dusk, uncertainty loomed. Are you brave enough to face what results from your actions? The question echoed ominously in his thoughts, an unyielding reminder of the path that lay ahead. Tomorrow would test the very core of his commitment and vision as he braced for the pushback. Jack exhaled deeply, readying himself for what was to come, a subtle flame flickering. Within whispering, the time had come to face not just the feedback but the truth of his own efficacy. In the quiet aftermath of yesterday's fervor, Jack faced a new dawn grounded in reality rather than hope. As he prepared to venture into the day, a steady reminder echoed through him: he was not merely an educator but a catalyst for change. The challenges he had faced were no longer insurmountable, they were opportunities awaiting action. Entering the classroom, he noticed a palpable shift in the air. Students gathered, emanating curiosity instead of apathy. Conversations flitted across desks, anticipation crackling like static. Jack leaned into the momentum, ready to dive into the heart of his new shared initiative, student-driven feedback. Today, we're taking our discussions up a notch, he announced, a deliberate calm masking his internal apprehension. You've shared your thoughts, now I want each of you to reflect on how we can transform our topics into projects. You will take the lead in developing your own learning experiences. A ripple of excitement coursed through the room, hands shooting up as students clamored to express their ideas. Maria suggested a creative project examining historical figures, while Sam wanted to create digital presentations exploring different social impacts throughout history. Jack was astounded by their enthusiasm, he could see their willingness to take ownership in the learning process. But doubt soon crept back in. What if he placed too great a responsibility on their shoulders? What if their projects fell flat? He steadied himself, recalling the lessons learned in his collaboration with the faculty. Growth often came wrapped in vulnerability. Jack embraced that vulnerability, asking students probing questions about the scope and depth of their ideas. This dialogue flowed more freely than he had ever seen, encouraging each student to step forward in ways they had previously shied from. The classroom transformed into a vibrant workshop of creativity and collaboration. As the weeks flowed by, Jack maintained an unwavering commitment to nurturing this burgeoning environment. His students brought their ideas to life, brainstorming not just content but the methodologies for teaching it. Foxing doubts that hung over him transformed into excitement. They were asserting themselves, grappling with the complexities of their topics. But this newfound sense of equilibrium was soon met with friction. During a pivotal class presentation, one of his students faltered under pressure, their project unable to meet the expectations they had set for themselves. Jack felt the heaviness in the room shift as embarrassment washed over the student like a cold tide. Here lay a test of character. How would Jack respond? Instead of berating the student, a reflex that would reinforce the fear of failure, he leaned forward with compassion. What did you learn from this experience? How can we support each other as we move forward? The room shifted once more, this time into a safe space of collective reflection. The student, vulnerable yet empowered, shared their thoughts, sparking a healthy discussion among classmates. Jack witnessed a deeper transformation. They were no longer just classmates but a supportive community invested in each other's growth. His mentorship extended beyond classroom walls, creating avenues for students to connect with one another outside of academia. Jack steered them to collaborate on various projects, then stepped back when needed, allowing their ideas to flourish independently. Encouragement became his vocabulary, a tangible recognition of the authenticity they had built together. The faculty meetings evolved alongside his classroom experience. Jack began guiding those discussions toward actionable strategies that embraced their shared objectives. He sensed an invigorated enthusiasm among colleagues who previously held reservations. They became partners in progress, actively participating in action-oriented projects that affected their classes. Yet Sarah's skepticism still reverberated quietly in the background, and Jack had begun to understand that the true challenge lay not simply within her, but in the broader culture of resistance to change. The essence of progress necessitated deep-seated belief and ongoing effort, not just from him but from the entire faculty. Bracing for yet another meeting, Jack reviewed Jules' latest project, burgeoning into a concept equipped with profound insight and a fresh angle. When it was time to present, he felt the weight of possibility lifting. This was not just about him anymore, but a testament to the collective vision they forged together. Today, I'd like to showcase some of the incredible work our students have been doing, he began, energizing the room with palpable enthusiasm. This is only possible because of our commitment to shifting perspectives on learning. As he unfolded the student projects, Jack scanned the board members seated before him, faces illuminating with intrigue. Each presentation echoed with student voices, bringing forth narratives that demanded to be honored. As the meeting concluded, Jack witnessed an unexpected crack in the stoicism surrounding the board. One member turned to him, eyes widening in realization. "This is remarkable, Jack. It seems as if we've barely scratched the surface of what's possible here." The validation coursed through Jack like a revitalizing storm. At that moment, feedback swayed from being a weapon to a bridge connecting students, colleagues, and the administration. Their shared ambitions and resilience dangled in the air, alive and jubilant. Days turned into weeks as momentum built. Jack witnessed genuine transformations within his classroom, assuring his students that failure was simply a step in their journey. He observed them rising with confidence, tackling challenges thoughtfully. His colleagues began implementing similar approaches, fostering innovation that echoed throughout the school. Eventually, the time for assessment arrived. An assembly was arranged to celebrate student accomplishments, where they could showcase their projects. Jack moved through the crowd, excitement pulsing through him as he observed proud students engaging with parents and staff alike. In that moment, Jack recognized he had not only carved out a niche for himself but had inspired those around him to cultivate their courage and empathy. The shadows of doubt, once looming around him, had been banished by collective strength and a resilient spirit. As he stepped back from the festivities, Jack caught a glimpse of Sarah observing the scene. The critical outlook remained, but behind it glimmered a flicker of understanding. Their journey, once seemingly at odds, had evolved into a dance of respect where dialogue could thrive. He raised his glass toward her, a silent promise to continue the work ahead. Jack knew the road to transformation was still winding but felt fortified to face whatever lay ahead. This was not an endpoint or a conclusion, but the embers of growth igniting into boundless potential. In the very fabric of his identity as an educator, Jack had regained a sense of worth, a profound fulfillment in not just teaching history but reshaping futures. He felt a sense of clarity. He had conquered not only institutional barriers but the doubts that once shadowed his ambitions. Success was no longer a distant dream. Jack had emerged as a resilient leader, intent on forging paths of opportunity, growth, and insight. The journey to become a catalyst had forged him anew, marking a milestone he would carry forth into every classroom he entered, ready to embrace the transformation, each day leading with conviction and compassion. And so began the new chapter in Jack's journey, where the echoes of his students' voices reaffirmed change was not just an act, it was a shared legacy built upon courage and collaboration, a truth he would carry with him into the future. So, as you reflect on Jack's incredible journey, it's time to show your support. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep the inspiring narratives flowing. Comment your reactions and theories about this ending, as your voice matters. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see the power of individual transformation. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to uplift those who dare to rise against their fears. Don't wait even one more second to share.